Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today with my in-depth analysis for Star Wars Battlefront 2's full reveal trailer. We have a lot to go over today and I'm quite excited because it seems DICE, EA Motive, as well as Criterion all working together on this game have been listening very closely. So I'm going to be compiling the information I learned from their Star Wars Battlefront 2 panel on top of what we can analyze in this trailer here today. So without further ado, let's dive straight into this. The first portion of the trailer focuses on Star Wars Battlefront 2's story mode, which will be handled by EA Motive and Criterion. As we can see in the background is Starkiller Base. Now the reason it's still intact is because the game's story takes place during the 30 years between The Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, and it's actually going to be a canon story mode. They confirmed this during the Battlefront 2 panel, so this is actually going to be a very important story to tell for this game. And on top of that, that explains the reason why Starkiller Base and the entire planet in general is still intact. Furthermore, we can see that this is yet again, like the first initial gameplay reveal of Battlefront 1, game engine footage. So yet again, we have the issue of how's this exactly going to look, but I think after seeing the game engine footage for Battlefront 1 in its trailers, then seeing the game itself, they're pretty close, so it's not really one of those issues where we're seeing a CGI trailer to paint a picture, but in fact, this is most likely what the game is going to look like, but still, as you guys know, I wish this was regular gameplay. In the next shot, we get a much better picture of what's happening in the story as we see Iden Versio, who is the commander of the Inferno Squadron, brand new to the Star Wars universe, reminiscing, which means that perhaps this story is told from the perspective, obviously, of Iden as she looks back on the days of the war throughout those 30 years. That's just a guess, mind you. She starts talking about when the real war began, which is right after the second Death Star is destroyed. As we can see in the shot, she is currently in hyperspace, and as she exits hyperspace, she is on an Imperial Raider class Corvette. Fun fact that this is actually the first time the Imperial Raider class Corvette has appeared in canon. I believe it's been in some books beforehand, but this is the first time we're actually seeing it in, like, for example, video game material, so that's a cool little thing to know. Now, considering she was reminiscing to her last orders, I'd assume that she was going in this shot to receive said orders, considering we hear the Emperor stating afterwards that the rebellion cannot continue to persist. The orders that Iden is likely reminiscing back to is attending the Battle of Endor and hoping to turn the tide of that battle, which you can see the Inferno Squadron is entirely capable of as they drop down on the planet and wipe the floor clean of rebel scum. Now, what's important about this shot here is that we can learn a little bit about an image that lots of Star Wars fans were talking about prior to the teaser trailer, which was the image here that we can see. And as we look at the Inferno Squadron, on their helmet is that very same image there. So we're not sure exactly what it stands for, but it's likely to represent that they are part of the Inferno Squadron. But then again, I'd imagine that the standout red and black is also what makes them clearly a part of said squadron. So maybe this symbol has a deeper meaning that we're yet to learn. This point in the trailer became a lot more impactful for me after hearing some information at the Battlefront 2 panel that I'll tell you guys about right now. So when EA Motive and Criterion were sitting down to create this story, they were thinking to themselves, how could we make this different and unique as a Star Wars story? And they thought to themselves how it's quite often that you see the Star Wars story being told from the hero of the rebellion and people being inspired by him, for example. And they thought to themselves, what if the shoe is on the other foot? Who are the heroes of the Empire? Those people who could inspire someone to become a stormtrooper and join the Empire itself. What heroes that were a part of the Empire set it up to be such a glorious thing to join and be a part of? On top of that, they thought to themselves, at the end of Return of the Jedi, you see Death Star 2 blow up, and it's such a moment of victory for the rebellion. But what about all those troops on the grounds who were stormtroopers? How did they feel when it blew up? What was their next move? And obviously some of episode 7 explains that, but the in-between is what this story is going to be focusing on. And once again, it's important to reiterate that this is a canon story, so if they do this wrong, it's gonna turn out pretty poorly. When Iden is asked, "What's next, Commander?" she says, "We avenge our Emperor." So it seems that now this has become a revenge quest, which makes sense in the canon of Star Wars, but also it seems we're most likely going to see how the First Order, which we see in episode 7, was built throughout these 30 years or so. As we can see, she's traveling throughout the scrap and debris of the broken Death Star 2, and then the remainder of the Imperial fleet enters hyperspace. The objective of this story, as we'll see with the trailer analysis and as it goes on, is more than likely to fill some of the plot holes and unanswered questions of episode 7 that were left and lots of fans were flustered with, which I think is going to make it all the more compelling. But once again, this is just based off my own personal speculation. And we see exactly what Iden was getting at when she said we're going to avenge our Emperor, because soon after we see her chasing down the Millennium Falcon, 2 TIE fighters hot on its trail, and we know this is Takodana because we see Maz's castle right in the background. Now obviously this is not during the Clash of Takodana because that was during episode 7, and here it seems like this is the only conflict going on this planet. I'm assuming this is due to the revenge quest that Iden and the Imperials are on, but it could be something much more. There isn't much narrative detail surrounding this shot. Now we're getting a look at some space combat in Star Wars Battlefront 2, showing that will be in the single player campaign, expectedly so of course, but still it's nice to see that it's going to be there. What this also symbolizes, as we can tell with the voiceover in the background, is the Emperor stating that resistance, rebellion, burn those ideas away. And the resistance part was obviously during where we saw the Millennium Falcon on Takodana, and now we're seeing the rebellion here in space practically being hunted down by the Empire one by one and absolutely obliterated. So we can really see some very grim vibes being portrayed within this quest that Iden is on. Or so we thought it was the Emperor. Turns out this is a Sentinel. Now, if you don't know about the Sentinels, I don't blame you because this is very much new canon. They're not mentioned all that much. So what is a Sentinel? According to the Star Wars wiki, Sentinels were a droid model used by the Galactic Empire after the death of Galactic Emperor Sheev Palpatine during the Battle of Endor. The droids were manufactured in the Imperial base on the planet Vatine and were capable of playing pre-recorded messages from their head. Sentinels were clothed in bright red robes that resembled those once worn by the Emperor's royal guard. The Sentinels were created as a part of the contingency, which was a plan devised by Emperor Palpatine to ensure that the Galactic Empire would not outlive him. So most of the Sentinels were merely messengers. They'd appear, verify the identity of the message's recipient, give commands, and then they'd leave. And so that's exactly what we're seeing here on the bridge in one of these ships, is that the Sentinel is giving the orders to Iden, and her exact orders were to crush out the resistance, to crush out the rebellion, and burn those ideas away. But to see that it's coming from a Sentinel is actually very new in the Star Wars canon. And obviously, if your orders are to crush out rebellion and resistance, that means you have to go for Luke Skywalker. Now, the initial shot, when I broke it down frame by frame, it didn't look like Luke was actually picking up his lightsaber, but rather standing up from a kneeling position as if he was waiting for Iden to show up. But also what's interesting is that R2-D2 is sitting in the background facing that way, so perhaps he was inspecting something that we don't know what that could be, and then Iden appears in the background. Now, what my biggest issue was with this shot here is identifying what planet it looks like, because it looks like a number of things. We could draw some comparisons to Solus, which was revealed in Battlefront 1 for the first time ever, and you could tell by some of the rocks in the background and so on that there are some similarities there. But also, this looks like some of the debris from the Clash of Takodana. So once again, it's one of those moments where this could be a brand new planet because it doesn't look a lot like Solus, but it has some similarities, and the same thing could be said for the debris of Takodana. Based off my research and what I've seen on forums and people writing in comments, is that this is a brand new planet. But if you guys know exactly what it is, feel free to fire away in the comments down below. What we can take away from this clip is that while Iden has Luke at gunpoint, we can get a close-up at Luke's face and see that he is very much young in this picture compared to how he is in The Force Awakens when we see him at the end, as well as The Last Jedi, where he's very much aged at that point in time. So this is most likely still in the aftermath of Return of the Jedi in that 30-year period, which, yes, we know the story takes place during those 30 years, but it's a matter of when throughout those 30 years, and this seems to be in the earlier part of that time frame. Right after, we see Iden giving a inspirational speech to her Imperial brethren, and you may be wondering what planet they are currently on with the red trees. This planet is known as Vardos, which is the home world of Iden herself and was created specifically for Battlefront 2's story. Now, we're actually going to be seeing this in the multiplayer as well, and it was described as a Walker assault map, and we do see that in the next part of the trailer itself, but it's still during the single player portion of the trailer, so I'm assuming that we're going to see some type of conflict going down on this planet, perhaps a rebel attack of some form. But anyway, on top of that, Vardos was described during the Battlefront 2 panel as a more of a city fighting experience compared to the open sandbox levels that we've seen in DICE's Battlefront 1. So what's awesome about this is we also saw Theed, which is at a later part in the trailer, and we'll talk more about that later, but that's the capital city of Naboo. And one thing lots of nostalgic Battlefront players loved about the older games was the fact that there was city fighting. Now, I'm not complaining really that much about Battlefront 1's maps. They're very much open terrains, and now we're going to start seeing more buildings, more clutter, more close quarter combat, and I like that compared to, for example, the Death Star map. We could expect more along those lines. Now, if we combine what we saw in the previous shot, which was Imperial forces mobilizing on Vardos, perhaps they were preparing themselves for the Battle of Jakku, which was the Empire's final stand. So perhaps those forces were all moving to Jakku at that point in time, and now we're seeing the repercussions of the battle itself as we're seeing Rebel X-Wings crash to the ground, and we all know how the Battle of Jakku ended up, but perhaps we're going to experience that on a much deeper level throughout this campaign. After this point in the trailer, all the single player stuff is done, and we are just going to be looking at multiplayer, starting off with the point of view from the cockpit of a TIE fighter over Takodana, most likely indicating that we are going to be able to do space battles on this map. Now, later in this trailer, we're actually going to see battles on the ground of Takodana, so it does make me wonder if this is indicating that we're going to be able to fight in space and then drop down to the ground and continue the battle there like we did in previous Battlefront games, or if it's going to be like in Battlefront 1 from DICE, which was there would be a mode for space battles on that map, and then there would be a mode for infantry on that map, and it would be completely separate. What I want is the entire battle together, but still, we do know that we're going to be able to fight on both ground and space in Takodana. It's a matter if they are unified in one mode. And now we'll look at even more New Era content as we see that Starkiller Base is also going to be a playable map in Star Wars Battlefront 2's multiplayer. This is really exciting because it's such a sick location and it's such a key part of The Force Awakens, so to be able to battle here is really exciting as a Star Wars fan. But there's really no special details to divulge from this screenshot here, just excitement. The next map that is confirmed for Battlefront 2's multiplayer is Mos Eisley, and as we can see, a speeder rips right through the center of the battlefield as rebels fight onwards throughout the streets. And Mos Eisley brings back a lot of Battlefront memories growing up, such as the heroes versus villain mode in, ironically, Battlefront 2. I played that so much as a kid, and on top of that, I remember the arcade game that leaked that was supposed to be $20. It was some Battlefront game and it got canceled as well. Just a lot of memories are deeply embedded in this map, so to see it return in Battlefront 2 makes a happy Matty. And then, at this point in the trailer, all Star Wars fans who love the Clone Wars collectively freaked out as we saw Darth Maul ready to square off with Yoda. And this is something that just made me spaz out in my chair with excitement because I love the Clone Wars and they were in my wishlist video when I was talking about the reveal for this game. But what's more exciting here is that we know now we'll be able to battle on Theed, another multiplayer map in Star Wars Battlefront. It's the capital city of Naboo, and this is the room that should look very familiar to those of you who watched Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, where Darth Maul, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Obi-Wan Kenobi squared off. So not only is this incredibly exciting, but this also shows that DICE was listening to a lot of feedback when players were saying, please for the love of God, bring in more heirs, and they didn't say, oh, we'll just do the original trilogy and the new era. They also said, let's do the prequels as well. Now, while we're talking about heroes, I do want to mention one thing about the story that I didn't mention earlier, which is that there are going to be chapters in the story mode, and some of them will also showcase heroes outside of Iden. So you'll be able to play, for example, as Luke Skywalker, perhaps in that one moment we saw where he was standing up, or we'll be able to play as Han Solo as he's running away from those TIE fighters, possibly as well. So that's just another way we can paint the picture of heroes being expanded in Battlefront in general. Earlier in the video, I mentioned how there would be dogfights over Takodana, but there would also be ground battles. We had not seen them yet, but here it is as we see Rey charging right into the heat of the Battle of Takodana. So very exciting stuff to see that Rey will be one of the heroes that we can play as in Battlefront 2. Because she is bae. And this shield gauge should look familiar to those who have seen Rogue One, because it is the one that is hovering over Scarif. Now, it's not confirmed that we're going to be able to battle on the ground quite yet, but we do know we're going to be able to battle in space over the shield gate itself, which is still very exciting and also relieving to hear that they're not just going to entirely ditch a lot of the content that they brought over from Battlefront 1, but in fact build from the ground up of what they already had. And the trailer concludes with Kylo Ren absolutely destroying everything in his path, confirming him as one of the other heroes in Battlefront 2. Now hold your horses, we're not quite done yet. There was a lot of information revealed through Battlefront's website, as well as the panel that I want to cover in this video as well, so it's a hub for all the information you need to know about Battlefront 2's reveal. Starting off with one of the multiplayer maps from the prequel era that was sadly not shown in the trailer for some reason, because a lot of people wanted to see more prequel content in there because there was a big focus on the original trilogy as well as the new era of Star Wars. But Kamino will be a multiplayer map. We have 2 early concept screenshots of what exactly the battle is going to look like. One of them actually shows clones, while the other shows, yet again, dogfighting. So this is really exciting to see that there is going to be clones, because some people were like, is it just going to be the prequel era heroes, or is there actually clone wars? And yes, there are going to be clones battling on Kamino. During the panel for Battlefront 2, it was confirmed that there will be more heroes, weapons, and vehicles than Battlefront 1. Now, I don't know if they are talking about the base game, which didn't have many of any of those, or they're referring to the base game along with all its DLC, which would then make for a really fulfilling product. So fingers crossed that it's the latter option. On top of that, there's a lot of changes happening to the multiplayer. There wasn't any mention of the star card system from the first Battlefront game, and instead there's going to be class-based multiplayer now. There are 4 classes that were mentioned, which are infantry, snipers, heavy gunners, and specialists. And there was a picture they used to represent what each class was, and from left to right, I'd imagine it would go sniper based off her weapon, then the heavy gunner based off the ammo packs attached to his chest, then a specialist based off the Imperial officer, and then a standard droid as an infantry trooper. Now you can customize all your troopers, heroes, and starfighters when it comes to their abilities. They didn't mention anything cosmetically. I'd imagine, since it was in the first Battlefront, that it'll carry over into Battlefront 2, especially because now you have a wide range of options to play with throughout all eras, and hopefully they let us go gung-ho with some colors and real cool camo customization on both the weapons and the character models themselves. I know that they want it to be taken seriously, but part of the fun is the crazy skins that you unlock in some of these multiplayer games. And yes, there is actually going to be weapon customization as well, which was mentioned during the Battlefront 2 panel on top of all that. And there's also going to be, obviously, a pre-order bonus. Asking if there's going to be a pre-order bonus for an EA game is like asking if the sun will rise each and every day. And so I'm not really surprised at all. Some people are pretty pissed because they include the Last Jedi heroes. I imagine this is to avoid spoilers because the game comes out before The Last Jedi. So I feel they're going to do what they did with the Jakku DLC and wait until the movie's out, then release the tie-in DLC for the movie itself. And last but certainly not least is the official release date for Battlefront 2, which is November 17th, 2017, as it was leaked beforehand. But you can play it early through EA Access and Origin Access on November 9th, and if you pre-order the Elite Trooper Deluxe Edition, surprise, surprise, you can play it on November 14th. And I'd imagine because it's an EA game, it's a DICE game, there will be betas that will be able to play probably this summer. Anyway, that is all the information I have jam-packed in this video from all the interviews, all the panels, and anything we could find on the internet about Battlefront 2. So I would really appreciate it if you guys do consider sharing this video. I put a lot of time into it, and the success of these types of videos are really dependent on my audience. So if you found this share worthy, I would most certainly really appreciate that. Anyway, regardless of the fact, I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and let me know what you're thinking about Battlefront 2 in the comments down below. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook, the links are in the description down below, and as always, do consider contributing to our Patreon. It fuels all the content we create here. Other than that, stay sexy, stay active, I love you all, peace.